And so people are used to environmental problems, but they're used to air pollution, water pollution, garbage, litter. They're used to things they can touch and feel and sense. Climate and energy are not like that. We can't see them. So if there's going to be one number that you remember, I hope you remember my shirt. But if there's a number, I hope you remember 88. 88% of Stratford's greenhouse gas emissions comes from energy. So most people don't recognize. I heard the other day, 89% of people want their governments to do more about climate change. People are worried. They want to do more. So what do we do about climate change? And people are just confused. I don't know, where does it come from? 88% in Stratford from energy. This is from a report that was done for the city. So if we want to do something, and I think most people here would want to do something about climate change, where we focus is on the 88%. So I'm going to be talking about energy. And that's a really close relationship between the two. Now this will not be on your midterm exams. This is a very complicated chart, but it's a really interesting one. If there's some data geeks around, this is called a Sankey diagram, and it is complicated. But the one thing that's really interesting is this, you can't really see it, this line here, from here to here, that's the energy losses in Ontario. This is useful energy. This is the energy coming in. So we're wasting about 75% of our energy in our current system. Now, we'll never get it to zero. We're always going to have waste, but wasting 75% is a lot. So when people ask me, what's the potential for energy conservation, I'll bring this out and I'll describe it to them. And the one that's really interesting, there's a lot of spaghetti going on here. It's a lot of complicated, but to draw your attention to this one, personal transport. There's gasoline and diesel coming in, and you can see that little strip of yellow with the orange at the top. That's useful. The rest of it is waste. With an EV, which we'll talk about, electric vehicle, that number is reversed. 20% waste, 80% useful. So that one switch and that one technology completely shifts those two graphs. So this is called a Sankey diagram, and it's, as I said, a lot of information on one page. I want to put some context here as well. We have a number of solutions, and people, you'll hear different people talk about them without putting them in context. So I want to put a little bit of context. So the first thing you can do is mitigate. Mitigate, how do we reduce it? It's, as you were saying, it's like the 3 R's. The first thing we should do with garbage is let's produce less. Makes the whole problem a lot easier. So the first thing with carbon is we want to try to produce less. And we can do that by 2 ways. One is supplying side, in using things that don't emit carbon. Photovoltaics, wind, different technologies like that. Non-hydro, non-fossil emitting sources. The other one that I'm going to talk about is the demand side. How do we use less energy? So this first one is mitigating. How do we reduce the amount of carbon in the first place? The second one is carbon capture. And this sounds complicated. It's actually, the first one is really simple, and it's been going on for billions of years. It's photosynthesis. I was at a presentation yesterday, sitting beside a young woman, and we were chatting, I was asking her, and she's doing her PhD in photosynthesis, understanding how do leaves do it? How does algae, how do they take sunlight and produce energy, carbon? How do they do that? How do they take the carbon out of the air to make energy? So she's doing her PhD on it, and people still don't understand that the magic that is in a leaf, in a piece of algae, is really interesting, and it's very efficient. So we've come up with something else called anthropogenic carbon capture. Sometimes you'll see it in the news as carbon capture, utilization, and storage, using energy to try to take carbon out of the atmosphere or try to take carbon out of the emissions. Quite expensive. It doesn't work very well yet. People are hoping it'll do better, but quite frankly, we're nowhere near as good. And this is why planting trees. You'll often hear people talk about the importance of planting trees. This is why. Trees are capturing carbon out of the air. Third one is adaptation. So more people are talking about this. This is where it's going to get worse. We're going to have bad storms. We already have changed the climate. how do we build our buildings? How do we build our infrastructure? How do we build our cities so that we kind of accommodate climate change? And the other one is, this is really nasty, carbon removal. This is using geoengineering, putting sulfur dioxide up into the atmosphere, putting up little mirrors into the atmosphere, trying to say, well, is there a way we can deflect more of the sun, more of the heat that's coming in and deflect it? And people are actually seriously looking at this, which is pretty scary. Anyway, this is my focus is on energy efficiency, energy conservation, 6 types of it. First one is fuel substitution, using less fossil fuel, using EVs, electric vehicles, and heat pumps as examples. The second one is behavior, just doing things without buying new technology, using less energy. And we actually have a very simple device, been around for a long time, and it's amazing. It's a switch. And if you don't need it, turn it off. Really simple, no cost, very fast payback period. People often forget about that. System operations is a bit more complicated. This is a large group of buildings like a hospital or a university, but it's also behavioral, just using the existing equipment better, making sure people are trained so they understand how to use it. New technology, LEDs, LED buildings, demand response, using energy at different times of the day, and then on-site generation, which we're going to talk about. Smaller solar and wind on site. This is really interesting. This is from a group in Paris, the International Energy Agency. They were set up after the oil crisis in the 70s. Very conservative organization, but they've become to be more aggressive. And they've identified, they've estimated that 65% of the reductions in carbon can be driven by consumers. And this is behavior, but it's also the decisions you make that we'll talk about a bit, how you go from A to B, what you eat, what's your house, how do you heat your house, whether you take public transit, whether you try to bike, whether you try to walk. All these decisions, there's some things that you can't decide. You know, where your steel came from in the car. Some things you just can't decide on, but more than half, you actually have a role in deciding what products to purchase. I want to talk about the benefits of conservation very briefly. Is that, yes, it's good for the environment. If you don't need the energy in the first place, obviously you're going to have less environmental impact. But it's also good for employment. Energy efficiency is labor intensive. It takes people to install, repair, maintain, and monitor and plan for energy efficiency products and services. Some of the products may be made in Vietnam or China or Mexico, but a lot of the labor is actually local. It's people who live in the community who are actually installing and repairing and maintaining that equipment. And it's good for the economy because it saves money. So it's the 3 E's of energy conservation. They actually, this same group in Paris, the International Energy Agency, estimated that energy efficiency could represent 49% of our savings. And there's solar and reducing use of coal and methane, but it's a huge potential. And that's partly because of that sandpeat you saw. We're wasting so much already, we could save a lot more. This is a really interesting one. This is based on some work that was done in the City of London, and I've taken it and made it for Stratford. And this is the amount of money that is spent in Stratford in millions of dollars. So about $100 million. Mostly gasoline and electricity, natural gas, diesel, fossil fuel and propane. $100 million. This is the percent of that money that stays in Stratford. So, you know, because propane is pretty local, it's pretty high, diesel is very low, gasoline is really low. So most of the money is going to Alberta and going to pipelines. So we estimated it of how much money actually stays in Stratford, about 12 million. So it's about 12%. So 88% of the money that you are spending in Stratford goes somewhere else outside of Stratford. Now this isn't different. Toronto, London would be similar. So this is why one of the really interesting features of developing more distributed forms of energy and more energy conservation is that work is done in London, in Stratford, by people here. And that money stays in Stratford. So it's a huge potential economic development driver. So this all sounds great. This energy efficiency should fly off the shelf. It doesn't. It's hard to see. People just don't, it's really hard for them to rethink about where is, okay, I want to do something about energy, but what my house, what uses energy? So it's hard. And it's not impossible. You got to think about it. It's hard to measure. When you build a solar collector or build a battery plant or build a wind farm, you know exactly what's being generated. With conservation, you're trying to measure what did not happen. You can do it, but it's a bit more complicated. And the third one is it requires all in. This is not going to be solved by government. I've been with a government. You don't want them to solve all your problems. They can help, but it's not going to be solved by big utilities. Again, interesting people, they have a role, but you don't want to have it all with them. It's not just big companies. It's not just Americans. It's all of us, and we all have a role to play. When I was with the government agency, I was often asked for a list of things to do. They said, Peter, we really want to give me a list of 10 things. And I'm really good at lists. Give me 50. I just want to knock them off and just be done with the thing. And I was really reluctant to give a list because it's sort of continuous learning. The list never ends. But I was asked so many times, I said, okay, fine. I came back to my team and said, let's come up with what could we actually ask people to do? And it's based on these barriers, really. The first thing we ask is that people think. If you think about energy, if you think about what you're doing, how you're moving, what you're buying, how you're using things, if you just think about it, you'll figure it out pretty quickly. And with the internet, you can find out very quickly where that energy is coming from. If you're programmable thermostat, if you don't know how to use it, ask a 12-year-old. They don't need instructions, they just fly through it. So, but we need to think. We need to think about that, what is using energy. We've got to believe it's going to make a difference. You can think all you want, but if you really think it doesn't really matter, it does. And we saw this with the Blue Box program. People believed, everyone participate. And the third thing is act. Actually do something. So think, believe, and act. So that was my list of 3. A report that was done a few years ago on the potential for energy efficiency in Canada. Again, greenhouse gas emission reductions, and GDP, and provincial revenue, and all sorts of economic benefits. Now, I want to talk now about roles of different organizations, because I want to talk, as I said, about solutions. And certainly there are roles for governments. I'm going to talk more about the provincial and the local government. Under our Constitution, the BNA Act, energy is a provincial responsibility, except when it goes between provinces or internationally. Then the federal government gets involved. But mostly energy is provincial. So a bunch of things here is we need to have governments develop an energy strategy and a role for energy efficiency, renewables, and demand district energy. So we need a strategy, and as part of that strategy, we need to set targets and monitor those targets and adjust them accordingly. Now, interesting enough, Stratford has a group that's been looking at their activities, and we're going to talk about that in a second. I'm in favor of a price on carbon. We still have one. It's a less visible one, but I know Mark Carney was under huge pressure and probably may not have been able to win the election unless he axed the tax, so he did. I was not in favor of it, and I don't mind saying that. We can talk about that. But to me, carbon has a price. It's an externality. We don't see it, but emitting carbon into the atmosphere is causing problems, and those problems should be costed into everything we buy. So we still have one now. It's more hidden, thank heavens. So I don't. Pierre Poilievre hasn't figured out where it is yet. So it's good. Mandatory codes. We need building codes, appliance standards to make sure things are energy efficient. We need funding for volunteer programs. And on that, we're going to talk about later that the Ontario government, and good for them, when they first came into government, I used to run an office that was spending $400 million a year on energy efficiency programs. After I left, went up to 600. Doug Ford came in, took it down to 200. He's now increasing it to almost $1 billion a year. So Festival Hydro is going to be getting some of this. And it's not from the taxpayer. This is from ratepayers. It's from your electricity bills. So we are going to have that funding, but it had been cut in the past. We need education, absolutely labeling programs. We need to encourage other people to act and building capacity. The last one is house and order. The governments need to have their own buildings and their own fleets in good shape. And the organization here in Stratford recently gave the city of Stratford a B+ for their house and order. And we've got someone from the city here, so congratulations, it's well done. And you know, you can do better too. But it's a very good start. So those are the things that governments can do. You have a utility here. So again, they can develop strategies. They should set targets. They're going to get their chunk of that $11 billion. We were having lunch today and we were chatting about it. It's going to be in the order of $50 million over the next 10 years. The Festival Hydro is going to have to spend on energy efficiency. And they may be hopefully looking for ideas from people to see how that can best be spent most effectively. And looking for allies to work with. Supporting codes and standards, it's really important. When people buy a refrigerator, you need to make sure it's energy efficient. There's no reason not to. Education, again, building capacity, enabling others to act, and again, house and order, trying to make their own facilities, their own fleets as energy efficient as possible. Now, individuals. Again, organizations, set a target for yourself, especially in a company. If you're with a company, you're on the board of a nonprofit, set a target. Look at best practices. Who else is doing something similar? Whether it's your house or the hospital board you're on or your company, who else is really doing a good job? Figure out what they're doing and see how you can achieve that. Monitor what you're doing. I think one of the most important ones here is to celebrate successes. Some of you are involved with organizations, maybe have done great things, or maybe in the future will do some projects. Talk to people about it, because mostly they're invisible. When I was with the government agency, that's what I spent a lot of my time doing, is bringing to people's attention the good things that were happening in the community, because otherwise they can't see them. It's in the boiler room, it's in the mechanical room. It's hard to see, so it's really important to bring that profile. And the last one is to be an active in community and an election. Be active in terms of what you buy, who you support. There's a great concept now that some of you may have heard. It's this idea, people have talked about a footprint. Who's heard about a carbon footprint? A few people? Many people have heard about the carbon shadow. So it's a new idea. So the shadow, it's broader than just what you do. It's who are you influencing, who are you buying from, who are you investing in, who are you voting for. So the carbon shadow is sort of, the footprint is just you. The shadow is not only what you're doing, but the other people you're influencing. So it's a really interesting concept. I have a daughter who lives in the UK and very smart, and we do a weekly email, weekly Zoom call, and she mentioned this idea to me a few weeks ago, and I read up on it, and it's a really interesting concept. So you can read about it, carbon shadow. So renewable energy, this is solar and wind. There's about 3,000 megawatts in Ontario. That's out of a total of about 45,000 megawatts in the total system. So it's reasonable, 1,500 locations. There was a program, was canceled. The people running the electricity system, the independent electric system operator, are offering some RFPs. It's mainly for existing users, but there are still renovate programs for rooftop solar for homes and businesses, $5,000. So that is available. And these programs are going to be available through Festival Hydro. You can see them there. So just to talk a little bit about district energy. This is very common in Europe, in Germany and Denmark. Their energy costs, as you probably know, are much higher. If you've ever traveled to Europe, you know their energy costs are higher. So they tend to be ahead of us in terms of things that are really good for using less energy. And so this is this idea is that you have a central location that makes energy and then sends it out. And it could be either heat or cool or electricity or all two of them or all three of them. But it's a central facility that's doing this. And it can be very efficient rather than everybody having a furnace and a heat pump in their house. You've got one central location, and so it can use different fuels. It's very efficient, it's cost effective, and it's really resilient. So it's become a selling point. Some of you may, if you're in Toronto, most of the buildings in downtown Toronto, the Rogers Centre, the bank towers, the university, are heated and cooled by a district energy system. And the cooling is actually from Lake Ontario. They get deep into the lake, they pull out really cold water, and they take the coolness out of that water and then send it to the buildings to cool them in the summer. It's one of the most energy efficient cooling systems in the world. It's quite well known, quite well. So district energy is a really interesting, and a community this size, it's something that I know people are beginning to look at. So as I said, I've been teaching for a while. There's a textbook I did. One advantage of it, it's free. It's online. It is, and it talks about case studies. You know, what are they doing in BC? What are they doing in Ontario? And it's you know, hopefully readable. One of the things that was an advantage to me of putting it together is I then went out and asked for permission to use some of the graphs you've seen in this presentation, and I was given that permission. So you can use them as well, as long as you reference them and make reference to where they are. So I think